starting with Naveen, Pramod, Sudeep, and Mosmi.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be part of this discussion, and thank you for having me here, Lakshman, Jalaj, Ravi. When I think of retention, I cannot help but share one comic strip that I came across. And it went like this, that the employee walks up to his manager and says, hey, can I get a raise? And the manager says no. The employee says, but if you don't give me a raise, I'm going to quit. The manager's like, that's fine, you can go. The employee is stunned. He says, if you have to hire a replacement, you will have to pay double what you're paying me. And the manager is like, that's fine. Employee is like, why? Why can't you just give it to me? And you know what the manager says? Because the budgets for hiring are double that of retention. That's in a lighter vein, but I think the fact is that the cost of replacing an employee that you've lost is about 2.5 times of retaining the employee. Not only in terms of the salary that you'll have to pay, but in terms of the morale that has gone down, or the uh, training costs and customer relations and everything that you'll have to rebuild. So while companies have been adopting different strategies for retention, one strategy which has emerged in recent times is implementation of an employee stock option plan. And today, what we are going to do is discuss and debate and delve into this question, that does ESOP really deliver on the intention of retaining employees? Technically, the employee gets a stake in the company, and it should lead to motivation, loyalty, retention. We'll discuss with our panelists here today and hear about the pros and the challenges and the best practices of using ESOPs as a retention tool. So before we really get on to talking about ESOPs, what I'd really like to start with is this challenge of retention real? Is there, is the, I would say, skills or hiring talent really competitive? Naveen?
Mashmi, thank you. Just a quick check to Chinmay, Paramita, and all our people in the audience, if you can hear us clearly. Just a check. Yeah? It's working? Perfect. Thank you. So you started with on a right note about conversation, which we as an HR end up having with our employees about retention, right? And the way they expect from us. How do we take it forward? So that was a good story to start with, Mashmi. Thank you very much for that. Coming to your point, for us, I think it's very important as an HR professional, as part of leadership, to continuously engage with a talent community, and that be it within our ecosystem or be it outside on a continuous basis. How do you take that storyline internally to your people? I heard Mark from Deloitte talking about education, and we keep debating internally about how do we take to our employees about the entire aspect of experiences and education when it comes to ESOP story. So I think it's a critical from that particular point of view. But I think important here is that how do you take, irrespective of where the talent pipeline is or talent plays internally or externally is, how do you take the story to the audience? Very, very important. How do you position, reprioritize your employee value proposition? We take pride in saying that we are University of Wealth in India. So as a 361, we are leaders when it comes to wealth and alternate asset management in the country today. And we extremely take pride in saying that as one of our core tenets of our compensation philosophy is that how do you, as an employee, create wealth in the long term. Our 16 years of experience talks very highly about it. So I think that story has to go out both internally and externally when it comes to either attraction of a talent and retention of a talent. Back to you, Mashmi.
So retention, attraction
Yeah.
is a real problem.
I would say it's a continuous challenge, and you have to continuously, Mashmi, engage with that talent community. It's very,
Right.
very important. And take your storyline there
Right.
through education series. That's the only play. That's the only play.
Okay. Sudeep, what has been your experience? Is the war for talent real?
Absolutely. I mean, Naveen was very guarded in his opinion, but the challenge today is real.
Is it audible? Is he audible?
No, it's not on. Just
Hello? Yeah, this is better. Yeah. So I think,
it's audible.
it's really, really with us, staring at us today. Retention and hiring is a challenge. And believe me, somebody is running a well, somebody is running some other. And there is so much of cross-industry movement also today, particularly for functions which are, they can be used across the spectrum. And there are multiple new avenues for people to start and engage. So whether you are sitting at a large multinational or an Indian conglomerate or a startup or you name it, I think, or a consulting firm or a practicing CA firm, the challenge is real. And look, we cannot run away from that. And we have to design the best possible structure for retention. I like the joke you mentioned, the retention budget is not there, hiring budget is there. I mean, it's ridiculous. You should rather spend more on retaining the existing talent than going out and hiring. But that's the reality. That's what is happening around us. So to my mind, I think, the topic is ESOP. I'm not dragging deliberately towards that, but the reality is you have to figure out innovative structures to retain and attract talent. And ESOP undoubtedly plays a huge role.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Sudeep. Just to add to Sudeep's point, and we agreed prior to this panel that we'll have a candid conversation. When it comes to education and experiences, both internally and externally, right? Again, I'm just going back to last couple of years' data for us. Our retention rate is around 95% when it comes to the right set of talent community. And that is very, very important because what we have done over a period of time is how openly do we communicate? What is the purpose of the overall plan, construct, program per se, and take it to our employees. So that's a critical element. Coming back to the external talent pool, it's again, I'll go back to my point. It's very, very important as a professional, as a hiring manager for each one of us to go back and continuously engage. Two things, we always say yes. One is to a client engagement and second is candidate engagement. We never say no, irrespective of there is opportunity or no opportunity. So it's very, very important for all of us when it comes to attracting talent is how continuously you are taking your story back to the talent pool. To Sudeep's point, it's a challenge because while we talk about India having a younger population, below 35 years of age, right, that's something which is widely available. But when you look at the right skill set of talent, that's very limited. And that is where you'll have to continuously narrow down your approach of engaging, taking your story back to the audience. Back to you, Mashmi.
Absolutely, totally agree with you. And Sudeep touched upon ESOP as a retention tool. So we see companies granting ESOPs for various reasons, maybe to attract talent or motivate employees, maybe to perform at a certain level, take the company somewhere. One objective of an ESOP can be retention. And Pramod, if I can come to you and hear your views on, does ESOP really work when it comes to retention of employees?
Coming to the ESOP, my views are a little divergent. My current experience and the past experiences in the MNCs, basically in the IT sector, the ESOP options to some extent provides a retention measure, but not necessarily. See, basically, all of us should go to the basic point. What kind of a workforce we are dealing with? Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, and the millennials. Now, Gen X, I think those days are gone. Now, coming to the Gen Y, they are the people who believe in wealth creation. And for them, I think the ESOP options matter a lot because they want to create wealth and they want to enjoy life. But coming back to the Gen Z as well as millennials is too early now, but to Gen Z, it may not matter much because most of the Gen Z, they believe in immediate gratification. Perhaps I think if you have ESOP schemes which are vested very quickly and where they can generate enough corpus for them, it acts as a very important measure as retention. But on the other hand, Gen Z, we can use the ESOP schemes to bring their involvement in the business and make them participate in the business. Same norm what we earlier used to adopt for Gen X and Y, that you can do it for Gen Z only to bring their involvement, and money maybe, I think it should come. I think I go back to what Louis said. You have the scheme, don't think about the money, but money should be incidental. I think that works very well. And coming to the MNCs, I think I worked before this in several MNCs, and I personally feel in none of the MNCs it worked. The ESOP options never worked because of the fluctuation of the dollar, fluctuation of the business. It never worked. But most of the organizations, they believed in having a variable pay. And in the variable pay, they decided what should be the short-term variable pay and what is the long-term variable pay. And they linked the long-term variable pay along with the ESOPs. And there it worked to a certain extent.
So I hear you. What you're saying is it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of plan. You need to be mindful of what the employee expectations are.
Exactly.
Sudeep, Naveen, has your experience been any different?
It has been mixed to what he said, for example, right? So I'll go back to my multinational experiences. I do remember, to your point, when we used to, a certain threshold of a bonus cash portion used to get converted into options, right? Either through a share save or restricted RSUs and so on and so forth. And my peer group, they used to come back to me saying that thank you for giving me a piece of paper. I hope it has a value in future, to your point, because of multiple reasons. So that has been my experience when it comes to the multinationals, banking fraternity for the last 2 decades. My experience for the last couple of years has been just reverse, right? So I'll go back to, again, the younger generation campus program. We were in the campus, hired a bunch of around 20 to 25 set of individuals. And remember in that campus pitch, talking to them as a hiring a cohort about how they will create wealth over 3, 5, 7 years horizon. And I think that resonated very well with them. Again, proudly, I'm sharing with the audience here that retention rate for that cohort, which is 2 years now, is again 90% plus. So they have accepted that storyline. So that is very, very important. Again, I'll go back to my EVP story, that how do you take your story back to the community where you belong to? Second, I think it's easy for us, given we are in the investment side of the business, given we are on the wealth side of business. Each of our employees, they look for creating an extra alpha return or a performance plus for the client. And when they see it happening for them, it resonates very well with them. But yeah, we got to do a lot on educating our employees at the junior level. That's something which is work in progress.
I hear you talking a lot about employee communication, and I think we'll talk about it a little more. But Sudeep,
So I think, it's extremely important for the management to realize that how value will be created through ESOPs, or whether value is going to be created through ESOPs. Simply granting ESOPs, and converting into a piece of paper, as Naveen is saying, is worthless. And that will very quickly lose its complete charm, value, and attraction from the employee point of view. So I can give you a live example of a multinational company on whose board I sit today. There was no ESOP, and the employees were very reluctant when I actually started pushing them that 1/3 of the salary can be fixed, 1/3 can be variable, and some of it should be ESOP. That's a long-term value creation. You're getting aligned with the company and the shareholders. And I could clearly see that there's a way for that portion also to create value for the employee. But believe me, I think it was a 1.5-year struggle, including the MD of the company. Everybody was very reluctant. We literally pushed it, and now they're so happy. So look, the markets have to be there to respond. And you have to guess that whether you have a potential in the market for the ESOP recipients to make money. If you don't have that potential, don't give ESOP by any means. It actually works the other way around. They will think that management has pushed something down their throat which is meaningless. So you have to be very careful. But I'll tell you one thing. Today, in today's day and age, where the market has become a very, very important factor, you look at a startup starting and they're thinking of listing, they're thinking of value creation. Now, under the circumstances, if you can align the promoter or management's goal with the employee's goals by giving them ESOP, and they're also seeing the value very quickly, 3 years, 5 years, I think it's a fantastic ecosystem. There is no two ways about it. The amount of wealth which has been created by employees through ESOP, I think there is no other source. There's a maximum wealth created by employees is through ESOP. We have to remember that.
Absolutely. I think there are enough and more examples of employees making disproportionate wealth. But one objective of ESOP has been to align interests of employees and the owners and make the employees feel like owners of the company, change the culture in the company. Does that really happen?
It does, but again, I'll tell you, we may think of multiple ways of interpreting it, but end of the day, the one thing which works is the value of the share. It has to do the work. My interest is being aligned with the promoter's interest. That's all fine. But what is the interest? Promoter's interest is share value going up. My interest is also that. So to my mind, the bottom line is that there has to be, I'm not saying it should overnight go 5x or 3x, but there has to be, somebody has to see that movement, that value creation. Promoter wants that, definitely. So does the employee. Now, if you align it, fantastic.
To Sudeep's point, mostly just to add a couple of my own experiences here has been that what we have seen is the entire shifting of mindset when it comes to from an employee to a co-owner, right? How I am part of a co-ownership journey. And not only we saw it now, we also saw it before getting listed, right? So how do you take that story to his point about value creation? How do you take that story of creating wealth for yourself over a period of time is very, very important. And that shift from an employee to a co-owner leads to a lot of alpha returns for us. For example, in our own performance metrics, we have seen that a what becomes easy to justify and people start focusing on how do I achieve more. I saw a performance somewhere written here as part of the forum. The employee mindset shifts to a co-ownership and shifts to a performance plus. That how do I drive that performance plus to my shareholders, my clientele base, and so on and so forth. So that has been our experiences. But yes, to Sudeep's point, that experience of narrating that storyline of you creating that value over a period of time has to be very, very clear. And once that comes out, I think it's all.
I would like to add here what Naveen said. I think co-creating the wealth, I think that has been the philosophy in my current organization. I just want to clarify, though it's mentioned as I'm the CHR of the Manipal group, this is not the hospital and education group. That group is called the MEMG group. I am part of the industrial group. We work in about 6 segments and a group of about 40 companies. Now, what we have done is, in about 4 companies, we are launching or about to launch ESOP. The whole purpose is to co-create the wealth. The promoter, incidentally, the promoter, he is the only executive role holder in the group, and none of the family members are involved in executive or non-executive roles. Now, what he says is, whenever ESOP is launched, it will help them to co-create the wealth as well as be a partner in the whole process. I mean, we have many employees, many young employees who wanted to be the entrepreneurs, and they did not have the capital, they did not have the support to run the business. So we have picked them, a person who had an ambition to drive a business, who create a company, and we have provided this opportunity for them to grow with the company. And there it is working quite well. And incidentally, typically, I think Capita may say what is the typical percentage of the equity which gets shared for ESOPs, but in our case, it's quite substantial. The promoter has decided to partake substantial amount of the capital for the employees who are who are partnering him with the journey. Now, coming back to I just want to touch on the retention part. See, whenever retention, when we say it's leaving the company, and from the HR point of view, I always feel there is a push and the pull factor. Whenever a person decides to move on, there is a push and the pull factor. Now, the threshold is a point. Now, to what extent ESOPs can be the trigger point? So that is where, coming to my first point, I say that it may not add significant value for the push or a pull factor at the time of resignation.
One takeaway from what you really said was the entrepreneurial worm in the employee is what you are really nurturing, right? And I think communication, from all of you, what I'm hearing is communication is key. So why don't we talk a little more about that? Today, out of every 4 companies, 3 companies are doing long-term incentive plans, and many of those are ESOPs. And what we see is that ESOPs are now percolating down to lower levels as compared to just the CXO or CXO -1 as it used to be in the past. So when it goes down to the employee on the shop floor as well, how important is communication for the employees to understand the value or perceive it as value as compared to just a piece of paper? That's one. And how do companies go about this, managing communication with employees?
I think it's extremely important, and you're absolutely right. Communication is the key. And I was giving the example of this particular company where people didn't have too much of experience of shares. Today everybody talks about shares, but they didn't have actual experience of dealing. So it was very important for us to communicate clearly what benefit it can create, how you need to go about it, and we did that. And I think you're absolutely right. Every stage you need to handhold. I will also add one point. The scheme should be structured and designed in a manner which actually benefits the employees. With the Deloitte session, they were talking about the tax implications. It's very important. And you have to handle it absolutely carefully. And it should not be assumed that the employees know everything and they can handle it themselves. We should handhold them to the extent possible. See, end of the day, when I'm giving ESOP, the way I look at it is that I want the employee to make money. I want the employee to get that money. Now, there's a benefit. I am not shelling out the money from the company. They are making money by holding the shares from the market. So capital market is rewarding them. So there is a win-win for everybody. The company gives the ESOP, employee gets the ESOP, but the benefit, maximum amount of benefit comes out from the market. So it's a win-win for all, but it needs to be communicated clearly. Without communication, it can be a disaster.
Sure. Naveen, if I can come to you.
Sure.
Today we hear the millennials or the Gen Z, they want more than just a pay packet, right? It's about employee experience. That is the buzzword today. Now, when it comes to ESOPs, does employee experience from an ESOP perspective also matter? I'll give an example. Employees crossing borders, right? And they trigger tax in multiple jurisdictions. One way to look at it is that is the employee's problem, he will handle it. The other way is to provide him with a tax support, uh, maybe a briefing when he's traveling. So do you see employee experience making a difference to an ESOP program like it does otherwise?
Good question, Mosmi. Thank you very much. Again, I'll share my recent experience. Earlier, our ESOP programs were focused on the leadership or a mid-management at the max. We came back with another program called Let's Focus on the Hypo, people who are high-performing individuals across the firm. So we rolled out multiple construct of the program, curated it, both worked well. This year, what we did was we extended the program to all employees as part of the annual appraisal process. To our surprise, what it worked was that people across geography, both in India and overseas, accepted the program wholeheartedly. Our pulse check says that 90% people were happy with the decision which we took in terms of making them part of the storyline of creating wealth in the future. So that worked very well across the generation, across the geography, across the segment. That got pretty well received. Where we got challenged was those set of people who were not looking for ESOPs as an instrument, as part of the reward tool, and for the first time they got it. And they came back with a plan saying that, look, they came back with a question saying that, look, we had a plan for our own selves. And to Sudeep's point, what was important there was to go back to them and explain them about how that portion of money which has got converted as an ESOP will create value in the long term. That communication was important. We got challenged ourselves when communicating to those set of individuals because their needs were immediate. They're looking for money to support that need immediately, not for the midterm or the long term. So that's one challenge we faced. Second one was, which worked, taxation, and I'm happy, my colleague, including you from Deloitte, will be happy to know that taxation worked as an advantage for us because immediately you save on taxation, right? Whereas on a long term, you got to plan, and we provide an ecosystem, having our own in-house tax expertise supported by all the big fours, right? To clarify and provide the direction to them. So that worked very well in that particular direction. But yeah, we got a challenge little. We had to navigate that through, explain to those set of people, immediate tax advantage vis-a-vis the long term, how do they need to manage it and take it forward.
I think great stories from a success of ESOP or the upsides, and what could be some of the challenges, something to keep in mind when you're rolling out an ESOP? Pramod, if you want to start.
Coming to that, I think one is the communication. I think over communication is too risky, and one has to be very careful while communicating. I think restrict your audience. Now, one of the communications what we have done is in 2 companies, we have called the key people as co-founders. They had no investment. We have called them co-founders, and many employees, when they came back, why they are using the word co-founder along with the regular title, we say that we want them to be the investors of the company. And it is helping a lot while getting the external investors also. But in case we publicize and tell the world or tell the whole organization as to who has got the ESOPs, that can create a lot of issues. So one has to be extremely careful and in communicating. And the second part is all these processes, I think they take a lot of time because of regulatory and otherwise other issues. So one has to constantly pick up those people who are chosen to be granted ESOPs and tell them the progress and also tell their role after the grant. I think this helps a lot. Any miscommunication in that area can damage the whole structure.
Thank you, yes, very much. Over communication can be dangerous. Sudeep?
other thing I must point out that when you issue stock options in a listed company, you have to be careful about what all you can communicate, what all you should not communicate, because there are other regulations which you can run foul of. The other point I must mention here, I think we haven't touched upon it, is that there are circumstances when you find that granting ESOP is becoming a challenge, but you need to incentivize the people and align them with the company. Phantom options have been used in multiple organizations across the world, and that also is a good way of kind of trying to involve the employees and reward them. Of course, in case of the phantom option, the entire cost comes on the company. So what you are trying to gain through ESOPs will not be gained by the company through phantom, but at least there is a way of aligning employee goals with the company goals and also rewarding them based on certain yardsticks. That's how phantom options work.
Right. So the plan can be different based on the company circumstances.
Absolutely, it has to be. Because you have to understand what best works for the company, you have to, and what works for the employees also. You can't design something which works for the company but doesn't work for the employees, and vice versa.
Absolutely.
I
So-
think, Mosby, just to add to Sudeep's point and Pramod's point is, one is the program construct itself. Second, I think you can't have one fits all. You got to customize it basis your employees' needs. That's the second one. And third one is going back to Pramod's point, and I'll also link it up with what Mark said. Your incentives should not become disincentives. That is very, very important, right? So over communication, somewhere you got to manage it, right? And it's very important to go back time and again as a stakeholder saying that why that program was first of all thought about it. Is that program meeting that very purpose of it? I think those are where I will be mindful about it time and again, and keep reminding our stakeholders saying that be guarded.
True, absolutely. I think we have about 5 minutes. If we can, shall we take some questions from the audience?
Sure.
Maybe a couple of questions.
Thank you. We talked about ESOPs as employee retention. And one example which perhaps gets answered if we go with what Navinji said, you give ESOPs to everyone so that nobody has a disgruntled approach. But that I think is not something which everybody can think of or afford. And if we look at selecting few, then we are creating a set of people who are not going to be satisfied. On top of it, when we look at ESOPs, we expect the ESOPs are to be granted because the shares will give a higher return and employee will be retained in that sense. If you look at an overall perspective after 3 years, once let's say the ESOPs are exercised and even sold, or maybe 3, 5, 7 years, whatever time, I don't know whether there is any kind of retrospect understanding that what was the cost of retention which was ever thought of and what we really ended up. Now, if we look at, in the beginning, there was a discussion that, okay, the cost of retention is 2.5 times of what the present cost is. I guess if somebody does a survey and maybe does its own introspection, maybe the cost of retention would be several number of times than 2.5 times, 5 times. And it could be a situation where the employees are still not having that loyalty or retention. Because they ultimately, and I like the one liner in the first session which said that if you are invested, you would look for returns. And if you are passionate, you would perform. I think that was something which was fundamental. So in my only question, I would not like to say it is a question, but I would like to have your views. Whether employee ESOP is a retention at all. I mean, if at all it was retention, and as what Pramodji also said, it doesn't work when he is resigning because then you are trying to build up something which was never worked out. So ESOP could be only in a case where you want them to be co-owners, co-founders, co-partners in the long run, and otherwise not. Is that thought correct, or does it defeat the purpose? Thank you.
Well, I think I have a different view. I think ESOP definitely helps the company retain employees. I mean, there are exceptions to everything. So you must be right. But by and large, if you look that there is a company A and company B, which are in a, let's say, similar space. Company A is giving ESOP, company B is not. There will be, and I don't conduct surveys, maybe our friends here can conduct that survey and find out that employee retention will be more in the company which is giving ESOP. This is globally proven. Now, of course, if it's a badly designed ESOP which works the other way, I'm not talking about those things. But if you talk about a standard ESOP plan, vis-a-vis there is no ESOP plan, I think company with ESOP plan does more retention. Second, cost of retention. You raised a very important point. See, to my mind, that answer is straightforward. And I'm an accountant, so I can tell you, it works much better with an ESOP. There is no two ways about it. I grant you ESOP today at $10. You exercise the ESOP at $10. Whatever may P&L hit I take. After that, you hold the share and the share price goes to 100, 1,000, whatever. You make money. I mean, company doesn't get affected. You're happy, company is happy. So the cost of retention with ESOP definitely much, much lower as opposed to giving a variable pay, phantom option, anything else.
I'll just add to the answer which Sudeep spoke about. Our experience has been that with your good ESOP program, the rate of retention is very, very high. It's extremely high. It's a high to a point that we are talking about 95% employee retention. So that's where we are. If I go generational among our employee base, and we spoke about university hiring, there again it's very high when I compare with my peers, because 2-3 years people start looking for a change. So that's again talks about from a data point for us to take a future decisions. Third, when it comes to Maushmi's point, which she alluded about on the cost of replacement, it's humongous. It's around 60 to 70%. Go and ask the same set of questions to those set of sectors and industries where they're losing people 40%, 45% overall. They're bleeding. They're bleeding red on a P&L. Again, I see this not from a cost point of view. I see this more from an investment point of view. And if you are seeing from an investment point of view, investing in the future of your talent to create wealth for them, each one of them, and that's your storyline, if you compare with any data, it's very cost effective vis-a-vis any cash component of your salaries or bonuses or deferred cash. ESOPs will come as a tool because any gain which they have vis-a-vis the market which has been driving it on a sheer performance of a company is their gain. So that's the way our experience has been. So it's a superb tool. In fact, our advice to, we are one of the largest private equity player in the country today, and our advice to all our portfolio company before they get listed is to inculcate this behavior of making them as part of the co-ownership journey. That has worked well for us, and we advise saying that shamelessly, please copy this protocol.
Thank you, Naveen. I think the gist, I'm sorry, we have run out of time. So the gist of the discussion, I think, has been that communication is key. Communicating transparently to employees and timely to the employees is what will help them perceive the value in the ESOP correctly. Second, what I'm hearing is one size fits all is definitely not going to happen. It has to be customized based on the company, based on the employee level, based on the culture in the company, as well as you need to revisit your plan, see whether it is delivering on the objectives that you had laid initially, and recalibrate it if required. I think those are the key takeaways of our discussion. It can definitely serve as a great retention tool. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maushmi. Thank you.
Just a moment, since I have the esteemed panel on stage, and
Sure.
So while we have the esteemed panel up on stage, and I cannot stop myself just asking one question. So if you allow me, maybe another 2 minutes, the audience, I would,
Sure.
go ahead and ask this. So while we talked about, upside pertaining to ESOPs, right? I think employee, make wealth exponentially and all of that. But what do organizations do when we do not see that kind of an upside and where there is a downside, right? So in cases where you issue ESOPs, you take that expense in your P&L and then you see ESOPs are not doing so well. It is underwater. So what do we do at that point in time?
There are multiple things which companies do, and I'm sure you are aware of them. You can reissue at a lower price. See, let's look at this scenario. Scenario A, you have issued ESOPs, and before they are exercised, the price is much lower. So nobody is exercising. So they are lapsing, obviously. What you can do is you can launch another scheme at a much lower price and do the needful. That is if you are really keen. Otherwise, you let it go, stabilize things, and issue. I have seen a company which has gone ahead and issued parallelly phantom options. Now, phantom option doesn't track the market, or it may track the market. It may track some other parameters also, based on management's view, what they want to achieve, and you reward employees based on phantom.
But the only point here, sir, is that while you reissue, right, you anyway have booked your expense for your earlier grant. Company may not be able to afford another expense, right? So what do we do with the expense that we already booked at that point in time? Is there a way to reverse that expense?
I don't think there is a way because you have already done it. It's a prior period. It'll go to your prior period stuff. You have to check with the Ind AS now if they're allowing. I'm not very familiar with that part. So I will be honest. I don't know exactly how you can handle it because this will be in a prior period item and not sure whether Ind AS will allow you to write it back.
Yeah, there is no provision in India, in
We'll
fact.
have to talk
Yeah,
in
we'll have
much
to.
depth about it in terms of how do you look at those aspects in terms of books of accounts and the costs pertaining to stock options.
Yeah, maybe just reason I have brought this point up on stage today is that we should also think on these aspects as well, because there has to be a way where we are de-risking the downside. So I think there should also be a point where we dwell and discuss, deliberate on how do we de-risk this piece as well. So I think this is the idea of actually bringing this up on stage.
Just put one point that from an employee point of view, there is no risk except they don't get what they were expected to get. The risk is only point of view of the company that they've issued to the extent of P&L hit they have taken. If it is not, I put it differently. See, as a company, I've decided to do it for the employees and I've taken the hit. So it's fine. It hasn't worked for employees. That's a different pain for me and I need to address that. But that hit I had planned already. So I'm not too perturbed, but the point is valid that maybe Ind AS or accounting standard has to look at in such circumstances whether there is a mechanism for reversal at a subsequent year.
Maybe ESOPs with the performance condition would work. So I think we'll have to discuss that.
Just to add to Sudeep, and I'm not sure if you heard when we started, Pramod and myself, we started talking about a story of a multinational where it became a piece of paper. And I give an example saying that my peers, they used to come back to me saying that thank you for giving the cash portion of it. The option portion of it, which is converted into a paper, please don't give it to us as a gift next time. Right? So from an employee point of view, if you ask me, you got to live up to that phase of your journey as part of the compensation reward which you have got granted in that particular year. Right? From an accounting standard practice, if you ask me, and tax experts are here in the room, you got to respect it and move forward because you can't do any reversal there. But as an HR practitioner, you can co-create multiple other programs to ensure that employees are not negatively impacted with a futuristic program in place. And that can be a combination of multiple programs. Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Yeah,
so
thanks.
I think that's where Mausumi mentioned we have to revisit the plan at periodical intervals, keeping in mind the strategy, because long-term strategy is a part of your overall growth strategy. So thank you, everyone. I would like to invite Jalaj to felicitate the panelists.